Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nabila binti Mak Yusof and my metric number is 201080, and this is our project, which is the engineering properties of biscuits for the subject engineering properties of biological materials. Assalamualaikum. Hi, my name is Nabila binti Mak Yusof and my metric number is 201080, and I will start the discussion by explaining the physical properties of biscuit, which is the moisture content of the biscuit. In previous lecture done by Dr. Rosita, we have learned how to calculate moisture content in food. But the real question is, why do we need to understand the moisture content? It is because the shelf life of food depends on it. In our case, it's the biscuit. What is moisture content? Moisture content is the ratio of mass of water of sample to the mass of the solid contents in the sample. According to Liber Civica ETL 2006, the moisture content of biscuit is approximately about 1 to 5% moisture, which is considered relatively low. Low moisture content in biscuits induces the reduction of microbial growth, such as Penicillium species, Rhizopus species, and Aspergillus species, which modes that produces mycotoxin, such as aflatoxin. In 2018, Food Safety Digest stated that aflatoxin can cause poisoning, which usually throws the damage to the liver and eventually leads to death. In short, biscuits have low moisture content, which can increases the shelf life of biscuits. Next, I will explain about how the moisture content of the biscuit affects the quality of the biscuit. According to the Biscuit People magazine, the uniformity of moisture content from the center to the outside of the biscuit requires penetrating heat and sufficient time to bake and cool evenly to avoid checking. Cheese the cracks in the biscuits after packing. Bailey 1928 discovered that such cracks extend from the center to the periphery, weakening the whole structure and increasing the possibility to the biscuit splitting into pieces even if a small shock is applied. Checking in biscuits is not favorable by everyone, especially customers. It can raise the customer's dissatisfaction. This checking can be inhibited by knowing the precise moisture content for the biscuits. Thus, it is very important to understand the moisture content in the biscuits to avoid checking. To determine the best moisture content for the biscuits, it is important to do some measurements on it. According to the research done by Anderson ETL in 2013, the moisture content of biscuits can be detected by observation of the color of the biscuit. The overbaked biscuit usually have darker brown in color compared to the underbaked biscuits. Darker brown color indicates that the overbaked biscuits have low moisture content compared to the underbaked biscuits. In industry, we can detect the moisture content of the biscuits using the infrared food analyzer machine.
Farewell, sweet cookie cats. I'll always remember the time we spent together.
For better understanding in how this infrared food analyzer works, let us watch the YouTube video given. That's all from me. I hope you guys can understand why we need to acknowledge the idea of moisture content in physical properties of food that we have learned in this subject. My friend Aina will explain to you why the thickness of the biscuit in the physical properties of food is crucial. Thank you.
My name is Nur Aina binti Jamil and my metric number is 201114. So I am from group 4, which is my group has decided to choose biscuit as for us to identify the engineering properties as well as the specific measurement method. So I did my information research by googling all the information I need, and the information was taken from a few reliable resources. I used keywords such as biscuit, method, and thickness to narrow down the scope of my study. So I used online article of NDPI and widely online library for my research. For the online article, it is an academic source since MDPI or Multidisciplinary Digital Publishing Institute is a publisher of author-paced open access scientific journals. So it is a reliable resources because authors of online academic journals are required to provide proof that supports their claim by referencing the sources of their information. Hence, it helps me to access the truth. Academic journals also include real-life case studies, which are excellent sources of in-depth information and knowledge. So by following the case studies, I can apply my wealth of knowledge to real-life situation and play scenarios in my mind for the better understanding. So by doing that, it helps me to get a better grasp of the concept and ideas with what I'm working for. For the widely online library, it is also reliable since it is original research and the author acknowledged the Institute of Food Security for the study. Online library give access to multiple contents with a potentially infinite number of resources and selection at hand. Hence, I can access anonymous amount of knowledge and share contents with others. So, thickness is defined as the state or quality of being thick or the measure of the smallest dimension of a solid figure. In other words, thickness is the minor diameter, which is the shortest dimension of the minimum projected area, and it is measured in millimeter. So there are three factors that can affect the thickness of biscuit, which are the fat content, water content, and also the flour content. The thickness of biscuit is affected by the fat content. As the amount of fat reduced, the thickness of the biscuit will significantly decrease. For the water content, higher amount of water available will cause the gluten development to be higher, hence the thickness or height of the biscuit will be significantly higher, and the thickness of the biscuit increase as the flour increase. It is important to study the thickness of biscuit to gain insight on how it will affect consumer quality acceptance and preferences. In the industry, the ideal thickness of biscuit is important for the processing operations. The thickness of biscuit also important for the packaging as well as the quality. So for the packaging, during wrapping, the thickness of biscuit pieces should be stable with minimum disturbance from its position while on the machine. When the thickness is stable, it can hold the wrapped biscuit in position. So biscuit thickness is important for the quality as it contributes towards formation, transfer and baking. Thus, the thickness should be uniform and simple for uniform heat transfer throughout the body of the biscuit. Since the shape of biscuit is irregular, which means that the horizontal section gears materially from a circle, so the thickness of biscuit is measured by using the digital vernier caliper. The thickness of biscuit was determined by measuring the diameter of 4 biscuit samples placed edge to edge with a digital vernier caliper. So an average or 6 values was taken for each set of the samples. average value for the thickness was reported in millimeter since the discount of vernier caliper is 0.1 millimeter.
This handy digital caliper measures in both inches and millimeters. To use the caliper, turn it on by pressing the red button or just slide it open. The yellow button resets the caliper to 0. Slide the caliper open to measure an article. You can toggle between millimeters and inches by pressing the green button. The measurement can be reset to 0 at any point to find the difference between sizes. Simply reset to 0 when you're done. Measure gemstones, settings, wire, metal thickness, and even inside diameters on items up to 100 millimeters or 4 inches with digital accuracy.
Hi, my name is Nur Nabiha Shazwani binti Khairani and my metric number is 201045 and I'm from Group 4 and I will continue this engineering properties of biscuit presentation with mechanical properties. Mechanical properties that I had choose is hardness of biscuits. So, how I'm doing this research is I'm use the Google Scholar and also usual Google, but I'm more to Google Scholar and I enter the keywords like mechanical properties of biscuits, hardness of biscuits, dough, cookies and many more, and I found a lot of journals and what I'm doing is I read it all and I doing some comparison between the content of the journals to help me more understanding about these mechanical properties. And I found 2 points that catch my eye that I think that is very important and will be affecting this hardness of biscuits, which is fat level and also water level. Let's move to the first point, which is fat level. In the recipes, crackers and hard biscuits have significantly lower fat levels, whereas soft cookies have large quantities of fats. Biscuits with high fat contents require little water content for producing a cohesive dough and produce soft, short dough. If the amount of fat and sugar in the recipe high, they combine to form a texture that is soft and chewy. Biscuits made with butter fats were harder than those made with either commercial fat or lard. So based from this point, we can conclude that the type of fat, the amount of sugar and fat will be affecting the hardness of biscuits. So let's move to my second point, water level. The lower the fat content of a separate, the greater the proportion of water. Any increase in the water in the mixture will tend to encourage the development of gluten, which will make biscuits hard and pastry heavy. In general, reduction of fat content increase the modulus. In general, reduction of fat content increase the modulus and the fracture stress of biscuits. So, what that I can conclude from the second point, which is the amount of water level also will be affecting the hardness of biscuits. If the amount of water level increase, so the hardness of biscuit also increase. So that's all from me for the explanation of the hardness of biscuits. Based on my reading from the journals, I found people out there are using the 3-point bending test to measure the hardness of biscuits. So I'm sure the seller out there are using this method to make sure the hardness of biscuit are suitable before they sell out to the consumer. So, hardness and fracturability analysis of the biscuit samples were determined using the TAXT Plus texture analyzer by doing method 3-point bending test. The analyzer was set to perform single cycle measurements which were used for the determination of the first bite force of the products. The first time plots were analysed for hardness or baking force and fracturability to reach the peak. Textural attributes were measured in 6 independent samples. So let's watch this video. From the video, we can conclude that the seller out there or the company out there will get the value of rigidity and also fracturability as easy like that, just to form the 3-point bending test. But I can relate it with what I'm learning during the class session, which is I'm learning the manually calculation, how to get the stress, strain, and how to get the fracture point, permanent, also the limited point from the graph. So I'm sure these 3-point bending tests are usually to know the minimum force that consumer need to chew the biscuits and to make sure the seller produce the biscuits that are not harder, that will make the consumer can't chew the biscuits. So that's all from me, and I will pass it to Muhammad Hanif to continue the presentation.
Hello, my name is Muhammad Hanif. The number is 201041. So next, I will elaborate about another mechanical properties of biscuits, that is the toughness of the biscuit. So for biscuits, the toughness is important to ensure that the consumer can enjoy the crispness of the biscuits and make it easier to consume. In addition, the toughness of the biscuit have to be on the right amount or value, so that the consumer didn't have to use more energy when consuming it. So, I will discuss about the point that will influence the toughness of the biscuits. Before I go further, I will explain on how I get the information. So for me, how I find the information regarding the toughness of the biscuits is by searching it in the internet. I'm using Google Scholar to find the article or journal regarding the topic and try to extract the information that contained in the journal. And I'm also found some info in the website. So after doing a lot of researches, I can conclude that there are 2 important points that will influence the toughness of the biscuits. So the first point is protein content. So if the protein content of the flour is increased, so the fracture force also will increase. The effect is related to the amount of water that gluten absorbs. Higher protein flour absorbs more water than lower protein flour. When more water absorbed, the dough will not hold its shape and will flatten out during baking. But when less water absorbed, the dough will be hard and it will make the toughness of the biscuit increase. So for the second point is fructose level. When sucrose was partially substituted by high fructose corn syrup, the higher the fracture deformation was, and the higher the substitution degree. In addition, fraction deformation increased with time after baking at high levels of corn syrup. Regardless of biscuit type, fracture force increase with storage time. So I will go to the method on how to measure the toughness of the biscuits. Based on my findings, I found that to test the toughness of the biscuits, we will use the puncture test. It is important to test the toughness of the biscuit to make sure that the biscuits is edible. It is also to ensure that the biscuit will not break during the baking, making and transportation process. To test the toughness of biscuits, large size cylinders are pressed into the center, while small balls, cylinders, cones and needles are penetrated into the surface of the biscuit to replicate the biting action. It is suitable test for biscuits that are not self-supporting or are contained. Puncture testing primarily involves tear and stiffness and measures the resistance of the biscuit to puncture. So next I will show you the video of how the puncture test works.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nurul Azhar binti Abdul Manap and my matric number is 201113. Today I'm going to present about the thermal properties, which is the thermal conductivity. Firstly, in order to obtain this information, I searched the internet for more like 10 times before I really found this suitable information. The keyword that I use in order to find this is like thermal properties, thermal conductivity, importance of thermal conductivity, rate of heat transfer and many more. The type of information that I found is journal, article, books and magazine posts. I think all of this information are reliable because all of it are academic information. So, almost every process in the food processing involves thermal effects such as heating, cooling or phase transition. Therefore, the thermal properties are considered important in the food engineering process. The three most important thermal properties are specific heat capacity, thermal conductivity and thermal diffusivity. However, in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the thermal conductivity of biscuit. So firstly, I want to explain what is thermal conductivity. Thermal conductivity is the property of a material that indicates its ability to conduct heat. The thermal conductivity predicts the power loss in watts through a piece of material. This is important in calculating the optimum insulation required for the oven. So, from a book, it stated that a reduction in moisture content causes a substantial reduction in the thermal conductivity. This has important implications in unit operation, which involve conduction of heat through food to remove water. So the saying from the book is proven in an article where it stated that the thermal conductivity of the compacted biscuit is strongly dependent on the moisture content. Particularly, it ranges from 0.12 to 0.27 watt per meter Kelvin. However, on the other hand, the thermal conductivity of whole biscuit is less affected by the moisture because it ranges from 0.20 to 0.23 watt per meter Kelvin. This is because for the whole biscuit, the effect of the fat is so heavy that it hides the effect of moisture. From the result obtained, where the thermal conductivity of biscuit are determined by the lime probe at various moisture content, it is proven that the reduction in moisture content can cause substantial reduction in thermal conductivity. So, from the lime probe of the compacted biscuit, it shows that the thermal conductivity increases as the moisture content increases, and the thermal conductivity decreases as the moisture content decreases. Thermal conductivity is important in order to determine the rate of heat transfer. This is because the higher the thermal conductivity of a material, so the more rapidly the heat will be transferred through that material of a substance. So, rate of heat transfer is important in the biscuit processing, especially in the baking process. Furthermore, in law of heat conduction, also known as the Fourier law, where Q equals to negative K times T. Q is the heat conduction, is proportional to the thermal conductivity, and it is multiplied by the negative temperature gradient, which is the negative T. So, from the equation, we know that by knowing the value of the thermal conductivity, we can determine the heat energy needed to bake the biscuits at preferred temperature. Next, I will present about the method of measurement of thermal properties. Methods of measurement for thermal properties. Thermal conductivity of the biscuit was measured using the commercial thermal properties analyzer, which is KD2. KD2 Pro is a battery-operated manual-driven device that measures thermal conductivity and resistivity, volumetric specific heat capacity, and the thermal diffusivity. So, the probe consists of a wire heated by Joule effect and a thermistor in the middle of the wire. To carry out the measurement, the controller begins by heating the probe for 30 seconds and then calculates the thermal characteristic. The sensor is based on the transient model of radial heat conduction in a homogeneous and isotropic medium. The wire probe was completely inserted radially in the middle of the biscuit. That's all from me. Next, we will present about the video.
To take measurements, simply insert the needle without bending it completely into the sample. Be sure there is at least 1.5 centimeters of the sample parallel to the needle in all directions along its length, then press enter. When the KD2 finishes the measurement, it displays the data along with options to save, annotate, or discard the record.
Here's how it works. A heater and temperature sensor are housed inside a needle, or in separate needles for thermal diffusivity measurements. Current is passed through the heater, and the temperature of the probe is monitored over time. An analysis of the probe temperature is used to calculate thermal conductivity.
So, as the conclusion, there are three properties of biscuit that we had acknowledged, which is the physical, mechanical, and the thermal properties. So the first physical properties is the moisture content, where it can be measured using the infra-lab food analyzer. And the second physical properties is the thickness, where it can be measured using digital vernier caliper. So the mechanical properties is the hardness, where it can be measured using 3-point bending test, and the second one is toughness, where it can be measured by puncture test. And last one is the thermal properties, which is the thermal conductivity that can be measured using KD2 Pro thermal analyzer. Next, biscuit ingredients nature, such as protein content and the amount of water available for gluten development, can influence the structural and texture parameters of biscuit. And last but not least, biscuit dimensions have a key role in good packaging and quality, or it will result in product discard, improper packaging, bad shaped packs, loose or over tight packs. So the dimension of biscuits need to be kept under limits so that it will satisfy consumer quality acceptance attributes. So I think that's all for my group. Thank you.